Some of the most common emails I get and questions I get are in relationship to sound recording and quality. Because my podcast is music related, sound quality integrity is very, very important to me. And what was that? You didn't know I had a podcast? Well, guess what? Bam! Check it out right there. Go check out my podcast. Anyways, so I get a lot of emails asking, how do I get a good quality of sound in a home recording? Because you can see from the look of my studio here, I don't have a special room. You know, I'm not running in a sound booth. I don't have any type of sound isolation room. Strictly using over-the-counter, off-the-shelf sound recording equipment that anybody can buy for a minimal investment. I say minimal because we're going to step through some of the different levels of investment you can make to get started on your own podcast. So we're going to talk about some of these mics here and kind of go through some of the best practices in using them. So the first one I want to talk about is this guy right here. This is a Microsoft LifeChat 3000. Very, very inexpensive common headset. Can be found at most online retailers for $20 or less. Originally, I had bought this headset for Skype and online gaming, and it turns out that it doesn't make such a bad podcast recording or audio recording headset either. Again, very, very, very simple to use. Simply has a USB cable coming off of it, so you can plug it into any PC and you're up and running. Now, probably the biggest mistake that people make when using a headset for recording such as this is mic placement. And it's a common mistake, and it's a simple one to make because it's a little bit backwards of what you might think. When I put on the headset, my natural inclination is to take the mic and move it down close to my mouth. Of course, why wouldn't it be? That's the sound that I'm trying to record. And this works quite well if you're doing online gaming or you're doing something like Skype or something like that. That really works well. The problem with having the mic placed at this location means that I'm going to pick up all of my breathing noise. I'm going to hear the air coming out of my nose and mouth because the mic is right in the path of that. Now the mic has this little black sock on it, which helps a little bit, but you're still going to hear that noise. The best thing that you can do is take this mic and just move it up a little bit. Now it might feel a little bit awkward because it comes into your line of vision, but if you have it just about even with the tip of your nose, you'll find that it's not going to pick up any of your breath noise or any of your breathing. This is going to make a big difference in the quality of how your sound recording is. So that's probably the biggest mistake I see when people start using just an inexpensive headset like this for recording. But again, for less than $20, you can be up and recording. So that is your most entry level to get started on recording audio and get started on your podcast. Let's take a look at the next level. Now, when we talk about the next level of recording, we talk about condenser mics. And these are just some examples of different condenser mics. And let's take a little bit of a closer look at these condenser mics, starting off with this guy right here. This microphone probably looks very familiar to you. This is a standard handheld microphone, the kind that's used in stage performances and events all the time. Is it a good podcasting microphone? Not really, mainly because of how it's mounted. A mic like this is meant to be handheld, why it's called a handheld microphone. So it doesn't lend itself to some of the better studio style mounting that you really look for when you're doing an audio recording like a podcast. So it's not a bad option, but it's not the best. So why do I have this? Because sometimes I use it. I have a dual mic setup in here, and sometimes I need a third mic, and this is a very, very easy thing for me to just plug in and use. Again, decent sound quality, and for somebody who's not used to using a microphone or a studio mic setup, this is a common thing for them. You can hand it to them. This seems very natural. They've seen this. They've grown up seeing people use these type of microphones, even if they've never used it themselves. So this is very natural. So it's a good way to get them started. The biggest challenge with a microphone like this is that most of them use what is called an Xlr connection. Xlr is a large barrel type connector that has 3 pins and it plugs into the bottom of this microphone. And there's no simple way for you to go from an XLR connection into your PC. Now they do make adapters. They make XLR adapters that'll plug right into the bottom of this guy that'll convert the 3-pin XLR connector into USB. I personally have never used them. I've heard mixed reviews on how well they work, but that might be something for you to consider. So let's take a look at the next type of condenser microphone. The next type of microphone I'm going to talk about is this guy right here. This is a studio-style condenser microphone. And this is a very good option to get started with higher-end quality recordings. This particular microphone configuration can be had for about $80 at an online retailer. This is a Audio Technica AT2020. And the beauty of this particular microphone is that not only do you have a studio quality condenser microphone, but it has a USB connection built right into the bottom of it. So that allows you to just plug a standard USB cable into this microphone, take it, plug it into your PC, and you have studio quality recording. Not a bad option. Now, there are a couple tricks to using this microphone. I used this microphone for well over a year of podcasting. Served me incredibly well, especially for the amount of investment that I made in it. Some of the tricks to using this is it comes with this handy little, you can see this three-legged tripod kind of configuration. And the problem with using this three-legged tripod configuration is that when you set this on a desk or a surface for you to speak into, is it's sitting right on a hard base. That means that this mic is going to pick up any type of banging, vibration, knocking on the surface that it's sitting on. That can result in some bad background noise in your recording. I've used this with a laptop, and just having it sit next to the laptop, it picks up the vibration on the hard drive of the laptop. So if you do have a mic like this, I would consider getting an insulating mount, and we're going to talk about mounts here in just a moment. But at the very least, I've even taken this microphone and set it on a piece of foam. Just setting this on a piece of foam so that you have that insulating layer between the surfaces will make a big difference. But this is a good option to get started with real studio quality of recording audio with a fairly minimal investment. We're still under the $100 mark, and your recording will sound fantastic. So let's take a look at another style of condenser mic. And here's the final style of mic that we're going to look at. And you're looking at this and you're going to go, wait a minute, that looks a whole heck of a lot like the last mic we looked at. Remember this guy right here? Man, don't they look really similar? You're right. They actually are almost identical. From an internal standpoint, as far as the actual recording mechanism inside the mic, they are identical. In fact, this is an Audio Technica AT20. The last one was a 2020. The difference? This one is XLR. Remember when we talked about the handheld mic, we talked about XLR connections. And this guy, instead of having the USB connector on it, like the last one we looked at, this one's got an XLR connector. So, functions identically to the other one. I love that other one so much, I bought one of these. And again, because it doesn't have the XLR, or I'm sorry, because it doesn't have the USB connection and it doesn't have the bass and stuff with it, it's actually a little bit less expensive. I think this one was about $60. The problem with this is I have an XLR connection. So in order to get this into my PC, I have to have something between my microphone and my PC. In that case, I use a mixer. But before we start talking about mixers, let's talk a little bit about microphone mounts. This is my microphone. This is the one that I use when I'm recording my podcast today. Now, it might look impressive, but in actuality, it's very, very simple. The arm that you see here, that's a luxury. That's because I want a nice, handy, out-of-the-way place to store my mic. So when I'm not using this guy, I can just swing it out of the way, and I can use my PC like normal. But when I want to record, I can swing it in, and I'm using it. Let's take a little bit closer look at the mount itself. So this is the microphone mount on the arm. You can see in here I have my my microphone itself in here. I have this is what's called a pop filter. And pop filter is an important piece that I'll talk about in just a second. And then you have the mic itself is mounted just inside of this free-floating mount. What do I mean by free-floating? I mean, if you see these little bands right here, these are actually rubber bands. Basically they're hair scrunchies. And what it does is it allows the mic to move and float inside the mount. The mic itself is not hard mounted to anything else. What that does is it gives me insulation between the microphone and everything else. So that way my mic won't pick up any form of vibration or any form of interference. An insulating mount really is a key piece to getting good, high quality, clean audio recordings. Now again, this one's mounted on this swing arm, but I have had these floating mounts just mounted on desktop bases as well. You can just buy an inexpensive base that'll sit right on the desktop. These mounts can be had usually in the $20 range, depending on what you're looking for. You can spend a lot of money on these mounts, depending on how far you want to take your recording configuration. This one, $20, $25 mount. Gets you going right off the bat. This particular mic looks a little bit different from that Audio Technica. Same style of microphone, just a different brand is why it looks a little bit different. This is a little bit more of a higher end microphone. Still, I think I paid $129 for this microphone used on eBay. Now, this other piece here, this guy right here, the pop filter. Pop filter is another key to getting good sound recordings. Now, why is it called a pop filter? It's called a pop filter because it really is made for the letter P. When you say that or enunciate the letter P, you let out a puff of air. That puff of air, if not diffused, will hit the microphone and will actually almost sound like somebody has bumped into the microphone. You'll see this spike in your audio. So what this screen does, what this pop filter does, is it takes that air, and when you speak through this screen, it's a very, very fine mesh, but it's enough to diffuse that air. So a pop filter, highly recommended. Big difference between a standard recording and a studio recording is something as simple as a pop filter. Pop filter, $10 or less will make a huge difference in the quality of your recording. So we've talked a little bit about mounts, we've talked about pop filters, we've talked about microphones. Now let's talk about how do I get the signal from my microphone into my PC. Let's take a look at a mixer. What you see here is my mixing setup. Now when you hear mixer, people immediately think about the stuff they've seen on music studios and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, there are very, very high levels of mixing equipment. This mixer, $129. Now why did I choose this specific mixer? Because this mixer has a USB out. So it's as simple as plugging in a USB cable into from the back of the mixer into my PC, and it's no different than plugging in a single microphone. So what this does for me, and the reason I went with a mixing setup, is I got to a point where I needed more than one microphone. So let's take a closer look at the mixer and why you might need one or want to use one. Now here's my very simple mixer setup. You can see I have all my mixing controls here where I can control the tone and volume and whatnot. And then up here I have my inputs and outputs. Here I have my two mics coming in. This right here, you can see these are those standard XLR, those 3-pin connectors that come off my microphones. I have power and USB coming out the back, power coming in, USB going out. And this here is what I use. This is a secondary audio output. I actually use two outputs on my mixer when I do my podcast recording. The USB output goes to my recording PC to record the podcast that's going to be produced later, and this output right here goes to a secondary PC that I use for a live Ustream video stream so that people can get good audio if they're watching the podcast being recorded live. And then finally right here, this guy right here is just a headphone splitter, headphone jack splitter, so that I can go out of the headphone jack to multiple sets of headphones for anybody who happens to be in the studio partaking in the podcast. So this is my very basic kind of hardware configuration right here. The real advantage of using a mixer is that it's going to allow you to mix and manage all of your inputs separately. It mixes them down to a single output, which then can go into your recording device. So I can control individual volumes. I control bass, treble, and mid of each input. So if I have multiple people speaking into different microphones, I can make them all sound the way I want them to sound. I can control it so they all come in at similar volume levels. That's the real advantage to using a mixer. Some mixers, this one included, even gives you the ability to add some effects into the into the audio feed, so that you can create the ambiance or the feel of the recording that you're really looking for. So that's the advantage of using a mixer and why you might want to use a mixer. Is it overkill if you're just a single person doing a one-person podcast? Probably. It's probably more than you want to go. But that's okay. It just gives you a place to get started. Mixer might come further down the road. I know it did for me. I recorded for almost a year before I ever considered buying a mixer and changing my setup. I was using that single USB condenser microphone. Now, we've talked about a lot of different pieces of recording equipment today. We've talked about mixers, and we've talked about different types of microphones and mounts and all this stuff. Your investment is up to you. You might want to get started small. That's what I did. I got started with a $20 headset microphone. Everything that I've shown you here today, the mixer, the dual mic setup, the mount arms, everything I have in my setup is about $500. Significant investment? Sure. But hey, so's any hobby. So if you have any questions, you can always get a hold of me at Zomcast@wingzombie.com. You can pick up my podcast Zomcast on iTunes. You can also pick it up on my website, wingzombie.com. Next time you tune in, we're going to talk a little bit more about software. We're going to talk about, now that I have my mic set up, what can I do with that audio? How do I capture it? So I hope you'll tune in again. I'll see you then.